is Akmal Haziq, and for now I would like to share with you guys about what is actually human trafficking. Literally, human trafficking can be defined and described as the unlawful act of transporting or coercing people in order to benefit from their work or service, typically in the form of forced labor or sexual exploitation. Human trafficking involves the use of force, fraud, or coercion to obtain some type of labor or commercial sex act. Every year, millions of men, women, and children are trafficked worldwide. It can be happen in any community, and victims can be any age, race, gender, or nationality. Traffickers might use violence, manipulation, or false promises of well-paying jobs or romantic relationships to lure victims into trafficking situation. Basically, the approximate year is hard to define as there are many reports in the Malaysia's news. However, the majority of trafficking victims are foreign workers who migrate willingly to Malaysia from Indonesia, Nepal, India, Thailand, the Philippines, Burma, Pakistan, and Vietnam in search of greater economic opportunities, some of whom subsequently encounter forced labor or that bondage at the hands of their employers, employment agents, or informal labor recruiters. Malaysia is a destination and, to a lesser extent, a source and transit country for women and children subjected to trafficking in persons, specifically condition of forced prostitution, and for men, women, and children who are in conditions of forced labor. In order to eliminate human trafficking in Malaysia, the federal legislation of Malaysia has imposed supplemental acts in order to prevent human trafficking. One of those acts are Immigration Act 1959-63, Act 155, Malaysian Maritime Enforcement Agency Act 2004, Act 633, Custom Act 1967, Act 235, Evidence Act 1950, Act 56, Court of Justice Act 1964, Act 91, Child Act 2001, Act 611, and many more. Literally, Islamic law totally prohibits all forms of human trafficking. Islamic law outlines a general prohibition of exploitation and specifically prohibits certain types of exploitation, including similar to the Trafficking in Persons Protocol, the prohibition of labor exploitation, exploitation of the prostitution of others, and of trafficking in humans' organs. In addition to the practices specifically covered by the protocol, Islamic law condemns all forms of exploitation, such as those that may arise out of illegitimate adoption practices and forced marriage. The Trafficking in Persons Protocol includes forced labor and services as form of exploitation in the definition of trafficking in persons. Trafficking for the purposes of forced labor and services is one of the most prevalent forms of trafficking in person throughout the world today. This form of trafficking often involves broken or unfulfilled deceptive contract with promised compensation replaced by debt that is to be repaid through work, wages which are mere fraction of those promised, exploitative working hours which do not reflect those promised, restriction of movement, and hard physical labor often in unbearable conditions. Islamic labor law clearly prohibits the exploitation of labor. This statement is really correlated as stated in the Quran, Surah Al-A'raf, verse 85, which means, "So fulfill the measure and weight, and do not deprive people of their due, and cause not corruption upon the earth after its reformation. That is better for you if you should be believers." Besides, forced prostitution is one of the most common forms of sexual exploitation that victims of trafficking, especially women and girls, are forced to endure. Often deceived by promises of employment as waitress, saleswoman, and similar occupations, women and girls find themselves instead forced into and exploited in prostitution or other forms of sexual exploitation. Islamic law provides a basis for the prohibition of the act of prostitution in many of the Muslim countries. While the act of prostitution may not constitute an offense in some legal system, Islamic law considers an act of prostitution as a form of sexual exploitation and thus firmly forbids it. Forced prostitution is likewise forbidden, as is sexual exploitation for profit. According to the Quran, Surah An-Nur, verse 33, which means, "But force not your maids to prostitution when they desire chastity, in order that you may make a gain in the goods of this life." For the conclusion, it can be concluded that Islamic law is really protect the dignity of human being. Muslim constitutions and national legislation have all condemned and prohibited trafficking in persons and related crimes. The context of Maqasid Sharia could be seen clearly through what Islamic law has imposed to the hukum of the human trafficking. In order to prevent this issue in society, every Muslim community should constantly take the precaution by doing the Amar Ma'ruf and Nahi Munkar, which means doing things that God commanded and forbade human to do things that are prohibited in accordance with the claims of faith in Islam. For example, we as a Muslim need to report the wrongdoings of the community, such as prostitution in the area, to the nearby police station or the related authority. By doing so, it will indirectly help to abolish this issue from spreading in the community. Thus, inshallah, the society we will live in more peace and harmony. Last but not least, thank you for watching. Ma'assalama wa ilal liqa.